how the Central Intelligence Agency was trying to figure out how its agents in difficult situations, some agents seemed to do very well under difficult circumstances in forming relationships with people, and others did not. And according to the research, they found that people that were more effective relied more on their perspective rather than their perception. And they further found when they studied it that 98% of people are almost permanently locked in their perception, and they don't have the ability to use any kind of outside perspective. And the most effective people are the ones, the 2% most effective, are the ones who rely on perspective. So I thought, well, that's going to be a pretty good topic for us to talk about as business people. So first, let's define our terms. Perception is how you perceive the world. It's based on how you were raised, how you were educated, your race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, your education, your profession. If you think of your perspective, it's going to be, we all have kind of lenses that we wear as we go out into the world. We all have a pair of glasses that have a lens on them. That's an interpretive lens of how we interpret reality. And our individual prescription, that's your prescription, or your perception rather. Everybody has their own kind of unique prescription lens that they're looking at the world through. Perspective is the ability to step outside of yourself and kind of look at things from kind of like a 30,000-foot view. It's sometimes thought of as thinking out of the box, standing in the other guy's shoes, having a little bit of empathy. It's the ability to look outside of ourselves. So it's really important when you do this, particularly in business situations, to rely more on your perspective rather than your perception. Let me give you an attitude or an example of what we're talking about. Let's say if you don't do this, you can get into a couple of problems. The first is simply you just don't understand people as well. If you're in an environment it's not your natural habitat, where a different business setting, a different group, people are a different race, ethnicity, income level, whatever, you're just going to feel a little bit uncomfortable. And your ability to step outside of yourself and try and understand the environment around you is going to make it a lot more easier for you to interact, since you can't rely on your normal skills that you've built over a lifetime. And the second thing is it's going to make it easier for you to accept feedback and criticism from people. So if I'm working with Joanna and I'm giving a sales presentation and I don't get the sale, and she comes back to me and says, okay, Mike, you didn't get the sale, let's talk about that. What often happens if I'm stuck in my own perspective, I then start telling her about what I did and why I did it. I'm privy to my own thought process, so I'm telling her my perspective. I'm saying, well, I knew this about the client, I knew these facts, I came up with this strategy, this was my idea, and I'm talking about myself. And you may have seen this in your own life, where you're talking with somebody, it seems almost like they justify themselves or explain themselves. And at some point Joanna says, well, that's great, but you didn't get the sale, let's talk about some of the specifics. And my ability to step outside of my perception and talk about myself and to actually look at it from a different perspective is going to make me coachable, so to speak. When you see people who are not coachable, it's usually because they're caught up in their own head rather than what's going on around them. As a side note, if you're in a relationship, how many of you have the thing, ladies, where you want to talk, you want to express your feelings, and he wants to fix your problem? Does that ever happen?
All the time.
Guys, has your lady ever told you that? Okay, what she's saying is, I am in my perception. I want to share my thought process, my feelings. This is what happened. This is why I did what I did. They want to tell you a story. And sharing that story and sharing that perspective is her way of establishing and increasing more intimacy and connection with you. And that's why they say, I don't need you to fix it. It's important for them. They need to be heard. Okay? So if you're doing that, what I found a very useful tip that can really make things a lot smoother. As she starts talking, just ask her, am I listening or am I offering assistance? And she'll be quick to say, just shut up and listen. Okay, she'll be happy to tell you that. Okay, now on the other hand, ladies, at some point, if there is a problem or if there is an issue, at some point it's going to have to be resolved. So at some point your man has to know that you just want him to listen, but at some point you may have to get around to fixing that. And that's what you'll find a lot in business situations, or if you play sports, or if you're a musician. People will tolerate you sharing your perspective for a while. Well, I did this and I did that, and this is what I was thinking. At some point, people are going to say, you know, Joanna, that's great, but you didn't get the sale. We really need to start talking about, okay, how can we get better? You know, and John, I understand, but you were out of position on defense. And when you got to the free throw line, you weren't making them. And we need to get you better on that. You need to improve in that area, you know. David, great job on the song, but you missed that note. And you're a little off key on this other verse. We need to get to the bottom of that.
Hey,
so
just keep playing though.
Yeah, just let it rip. So, at some point you're going to have to step outside of your own perception and get into the perspective if you really want to improve yourself and get better. So, over the next couple of weeks, I have an agenda for you. I have a tip for you to take home with you this week. This week, we're going to talk about what creates or dominates your perception, such as life experiences, core motivators, natural inclination, and your three faces. You all have three faces, whether you know it or not. Week 3, we're going to talk about learning about your real self, the areas of your life you can focus on to gain perspective. You can learn about resource depletion, knowledge under stress, earning trust, and improving your conversations. In our final week, we're going to do a recap, how to learn how to be a better listener, and questions you can ask, direct practical applications. Today, what I want you guys to take with you is an experiment I call it, if you want to improve your perspective, it's what I call the video game. I want you to try, it's difficult to do, but it can be very powerful. I want you to think, if I'm talking again to Joanna, I want to step outside of myself. And I kind of want to look hovering down so that the Mike Hodges that you hear right now is not really Mike Hodges, it's a character in a video game. It's a character in a video game, and I'm up here with my video controller. If you think about what you do in a video game, you have a character that you see running around in an environment, and your goal is to go and shoot the bad guys, get your resources, avoid obstacles, and as you see things happening, you manipulate your character to do certain things. A good way to improve your perspective is to kind of try and think outside of yourself and just watch me. As I'm talking to Joanna, I'm not looking at me, I'm looking at a video game character. And so I'm going to watch her. Makes a big difference. Is she crossing her arms? Is she looking around? Is she looking at her watch? Or is she leaning in? Is she nodding her head? Is she asking questions and looking at my sales material? I'm also going to look at myself. Am I standing too close? Am I talking too loud or too soft? Is my body language not good? I'm going to try and objectively look at myself. And so to the extent that you can do that, to the extent that you can step outside of yourself and look down at yourself as if you were a character in a video game, and again, I know that's weird, but that can be a very powerful tool to developing perspective rather than perception. So I hope that helps. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll talk again next week about perception versus perspective. Thank you.